Maybe the best way to see some of the striking, historically important, often ancient sites from Athens through Croatia to Venice is by taking the opportunity to cruise along the Adriatic Sea, seeing some of the most beautiful water in any ocean in the world. Hi everyone, this is your world, and welcome to it, where I talk about my visits to some interesting places. I'm Bill Bernstein. This video is about all the impressive, moving things we saw as we visited some of the most well-known sites in Athens, other parts of Greece, Montenegro, Croatia, and finally Venice. This was before and during a cruise we took aboard the ship the Viking Sky. I want to dive right into the details of what we saw, and I'll give you a look at the high points of the ship and Viking cruises later in this video. The next day we were picked up at our hotel by our driver with the tour company Warm Penguin. There's a name you can remember. For our private tour, I'll leave a link to Warm Penguin in the description below. After having waited since elementary school, I finally got to go to the Acropolis. The Acropolis is the area, and the Parthenon is the most famous building there. In my mind, the Parthenon has always been a symbol of the contributions of Greece to Western civilization, our culture, philosophy, and democracy. We had a separate guide for that portion of our day. There is a link to the guide we used below. Before the Parthenon was built, there had been a temple to Athena, the patron goddess of the city of Athens, that was destroyed during a Persian invasion in 480 BC. The basis of the Parthenon we see today was built by about 438 BC. Then in the 6th century AD, it became a church and was a mosque after Athens was conquered by the Ottoman Empire in the 1460s. It looks the way it does today because during a war between the Ottomans and the Venetians in 1887, there was an explosion inside that damaged the building and many of the sculptures. The other well-known building on the Acropolis, again, the Acropolis is the hill that the Parthenon and this temple are on, is the Erechtheion, which is a temple devoted to Athena and Poseidon. The statues that you see are the caryatids, which are replicas of the original statues that are preserved in the Acropolis Museum. Our next stop was that museum. This is just a quick view of one hallway, and these are the original statues of the caryatids that were at the Erechtheion. These small statues are a representation of the gods when the decision was made to have Athena, rather than Poseidon, be the patron god of Athens. The final verdict was for Athena, of course. After lunch, we stopped by the Panathenaic Stadium, where the first games of the modern Olympics were held in 1896. From there, it was a short drive up the highest hill in Athens, from which we got a great view of the city. From there, we went to the Academy of Athens, established in 1926 in a building that had been a museum since 1861. It is the country's most important research center and held meaning just to see the statues of Plato and Socrates in front. Next was the changing of the guard, a pretty remarkable thing to see. The Presidential Guard, or Evzones, takes place at the tomb of the unknown soldier in front of the Parliament building. It is considered to be the highest honor to be chosen for this duty. Before assuming the role, they practice for 1 month, standing perfectly still for 1 hour that they'll be on duty. The idea of moving in slow motion as they leave is supposedly to start the blood circulation after not moving for so long. As you can see, witnessing this is quite an experience. Those tiny tufts at the toes of their shoes hold a knife, by the way. Then we headed to the ancient Agora of Athens from about the same era as the Parthenon. This area was used as a gathering place for government, commerce, and philosophical discussions. It also became an open-air marketplace. This area might actually be where the origins of Greek democracy and philosophy were born. Speaking of philosophy, this statue is a modern sculptor's visualization of a meeting between Socrates and Confucius, who lived about the same time. The Temple of Hephaestus, overlooking the Agora, is one of the most well-preserved ancient temples built around 450 BC, about the same time as the Parthenon. We found it to be another highlight of our visit and wonder why this doesn't attract more visitors to the site. We were glad we went there. After dinner, we caught a beautiful view of a sunset over Athens. We saw several such sunsets as well as rising moons once we were on board the ship. so you get to catch a glimpse of a few of those later in the video. The next morning, we boarded the Viking Sky, got a nice view of the harbor, and relaxed for a nice lunch. In the evening, we sailed and got a nice view of the almost full rising moon from the deck of the ship. After sailing from Athens, the next day of the cruise was at the port of Katakolon, where we docked for our visit to Olympia, the site of what is considered the first ancient Olympic Games in 776 BC. The Games were held every 4 years for about 1,200 years. We're talking about a long time here. And after disappearing for hundreds of years, were started again in 1896, as I mentioned earlier. The Games were held in an extremely large area, and this gate is the entrance to the track where the first and only event of the first few Games was held. It was the Stadion race of 600 feet. Other events were introduced later. The Games were dedicated to Zeus, the father of the god, and there are several temples to Zeus on the grounds. This simple area was where the sacrifice was made in ancient times to begin the Games. Today, almost 3,000 years later, it is this spot where the Olympic torch is lit before carrying it around the world. The torch is lit by the light of the sun concentrated by a parabolic mirror, as the sun represents the Greek god Apollo. It was nice and warm walking through that area, so it was a relief to go from there to the Magna Graecia farm, an olive growing and olive oil producing estate where we absorbed some interesting information about olive oil, purchased some of the best olive oil we've ever had, and had a snack watching a couple of those who work there exhibit some Greek dancing. Then back on board, where we had a nice view of the moon both before and after sunset. Our stop the next day was in Corfu, a Greek island that is just off the coast of northwest Greece and is actually probably closer to Albania. There we took a drive up to the monastery of the Holy Theotokos, dating back to 1225. It's known for its great views as well as the remarkable chapel to the Virgin Mary. Then we had a snack in a cafe with an interesting elevator. As you can see, it's operated by your foot. Then we drove back and had a walk around the town of Corfu. Then back on our ship, we saw a beautiful sunset over the ocean, followed by watching the moon rising over the sea. The next morning, we got our first look at the beautiful waters of the Adriatic. That's a Princess cruise ship docked not far away, but we were at the dock itself, either because of the smaller size Viking ship, or maybe just because we were there first. This was in Montenegro. The drive the day before was nothing compared to the one we were on this day, up a true long and winding road with something like 25 or 26 switchback hairpin turns for the bus to navigate. Beautiful views all the way up. And at the top, we had to trade the absence of a clear view for the experience of being in a cloud. We ended up in the previous capital of Montenegro, Cetinje, with a visit to the museum dedicated to King Nikola. Then back to the harbor in our ship with more of the beautiful views we were lucky to have, really. We thought that the view of the hillside at night was really quite striking, not long before we sailed from the port. The next morning in Dubrovnik, Croatia, we found the beauty of the water of the Adriatic here stunning. The excursion we chose was to take a boat around to arrive at the old city by water, enabling us to get some great views of the city wall as we went by. We spent some time walking through and taking in the atmosphere of the old town once we were there. It dates back to the 7th century. A lot of people say that the walk on the city walls is something you must do, but we didn't make it up there. The next morning we were in Split, Croatia. The first part of our excursion there was to the 2,000-year-old city Trogir. From there we went back to Split and the palace built by the Roman Emperor Diocletian in about 305 AD. He was the only emperor to retire, and as you can see from the map, he had a city-sized palace. We spent a good amount of time with our guide exploring the palace and certainly didn't see it all. Returning to the ship, we got another look. I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but you guessed it, the waters of the Adriatic. The last port was near Venice. From there, we went on a boat to the island of Murano, famous for the glass blowing there. Watching a glass blower create something is always remarkable. From there, onto another island, Burano, which is famous for its multicolored buildings and for its lace making. Since this video doesn't include a lot of the more well-known sites in Venice, I'll include a link below to another of our videos with the highlights of visiting those sites, such as the Doge's Palace, being on a gondola, and so on.
Ciao Venezia, ciao Venezia, ciao bye bye. Ciao Venezia, ciao Venezia, ciao, ciao ciao.
What I haven't talked about so far is our experience aboard the Viking Sky. This was our second cruise aboard a Viking ship. They all have the same design, so we knew our way around from the time we boarded. In addition to the buffet at the World Cafe, which is really, really nice, all Viking Ocean ships have the main restaurant called the Restaurant, as well as the two specialty restaurants, the Italian restaurant, Manfredi's, where we ate a couple of nights, and the chef's table. Although we found the food to be exceptional in each of the restaurants, the chef's table was my favorite. It wasn't long before we were looking forward to every meal. That tends to happen on a cruise, as cruise lines all devote themselves to providing great food, and there's always a focus on food. Even the buffet, the World Cafe, has food that's so appealing that one night we bypassed a reservation in a specialty restaurant when the World Cafe was having a special seafood night. I'm a vegetarian and loved that in the chef's table, I got a specially prepared, amazing vegan meal each time we ate.
Okay, so this is Agora potato chop. So it's stuffed with some green peas, carrots, with some mozzarella cheese, garam masala, and then garnished with some chervil, and underneath we serve with the spinach sambal.
And Kim loved the seafood or poultry dishes she had. Manfredi's, the Italian restaurant, is many people's favorite. It's a tough choice because that was also something out of the ordinary. Kim might choose the World Cafe, and we had lunch there every day that we were on board at lunchtime. I have to tell you about an experience we had on board. As we left the restaurant one night, the restaurant manager for the ship asked me how I liked the dinner, and then, without my telling him, said that he remembered me from the cruise we took around Iceland 9 months earlier. That's what brings people back to Viking. Every stateroom on a Viking ship, from the least expensive to the suites, has a veranda, and the bathrooms are large enough to move around in with heated floors. Really nice touch. Many things you'd pay for on other cruise lines are included in Viking cruises. For example, you don't pay for the specialty restaurants in Viking, and you don't pay to go in the thermal spa. We spent some quality time in the thermal spa. The pool with its water jets is even warmer than the jacuzzi next to it, and I wish I had more time to relax there. There was always other things to do. After the thermal pool, we went in the steam room, and from there to the snow grotto. That's real snow. We couldn't bring ourselves to do the ice bucket challenge, but there were a lot of souls that were brave enough to do it. So, you could always think about giving it a try. We had great guides on the excursions we took. We didn't worry about packing or unpacking. And because Viking ships aren't as large as those of many other lines with a maximum of 930 passengers, we never felt that the group we were with on each excursion was too large. It was always comfortable. If you want to learn more about the specifics of cruising, in addition to this and in my other videos, there are many great YouTube channels about cruising you can check out. I learned a great deal from Tips for Travelers, and I'll put a link below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, be sure to hit subscribe below. You can click on this link to my video about our cruise visiting the most well-known sites in Iceland. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Until then, so long from all of us in your world.